You'll never say that. You never say that. Champions of Europe. You can never say that.
Hi and welcome to the Fussball channel. I'm your host Marcus Fjørtoft, and as always joined by co-host Ian Fjørtoft for this Champions League special. It's the day after that in which Dortmund advanced, Bayern advanced on the Tuesday, Real Madrid won in a penalty shootout, etc., etc. First of all, now that the quarterfinals are set, we had the last 16 games done and dusted. Overall impressions are things that stand out for you before we go into the specific matchups.
Well, if we get German glasses on, I mean, we expected Bayern to go far in this tournament because I think that's just what Bayern do. And then we have the 10th place in the Bundesliga, Dortmund, progressing, and now we can end up having a German game in the semi-final as well, which is quite interesting when we were looking back to that game at Wembley when Bayern beat Dortmund back in the days. But you were at Arsenal. Before I start with the English teams, Marcus, you saw one of them progress. We have Liverpool out, we have Manchester City out, but Aston Villa and your Arsenal still in.
My dear Arsenal. And yesterday when we were at the stadium, and you know, it's a matter for both teams, it's just a matter of just getting through the game in a way. And for PSV, it's to leave a good mark in front of fantastic PSV fans, which I sat right behind. It is incredible, the atmosphere that they brought to London. But then you're thinking already, okay, who are we going to be playing, etc. And so it was a very nice, relaxed atmosphere at Arsenal, 2-2 overall. So overall good. And with Liverpool going out the day before, and then you have a mighty old European giant that in Villa as well, that become then the two English teams. And then it was just a matter of, okay, who are you playing? And then it's the penalty shootout between Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid. And the thing is, I think for whether it's Dortmund or it's Bayern or whatnot, it's something special about the Champions League when you're playing the big teams. And so as much as maybe I prefer a bit Atletico Madrid, Arsenal, Real Madrid, it rings true to the Champions League, doesn't it? In the same way you could say about a Bayern against an Inter, Dortmund against Barcelona. These are European giants, and I think that's what we are getting in these quarterfinals. We're getting pretty good matchups.
With so many things to talk about yesterday. I'm with you. Aston Villa, I grew up, Marcus, I'm born in 67. I remember I was 14, 15 years of age when Aston Villa went all the way to the final. They played in Holland. They played against mighty Bayern with a great Bayern team. And then Aston Villa winning. Peter With scoring the winner. I remember a Jimmy Rimmer, where the goalkeeper of Aston Villa had been injured after 10 minutes. They had to put on Nigel Spink, who turned into be the match winner, so to say, for them. But I mean, with Unai Emery in there, with his expertise on European Cups, from Spain, what he did there, he's had a fantastic career. The only place it didn't work out for him was in Arsenal. I think there was two things that kind of influenced that. Point one, you're coming after Arsene Wenger. That is a tough task for anyone. Ask David Moyes at Manchester United. And also the fact that it didn't give him time, and time doesn't happen in football. And I think that is and of course, I was watching a goal show, but our main game that I watched was Atletico Madrid against Real Madrid. And there's just some funny things about it. I mean, I've never seen VAR on a penalty before. There is always first thing for anything. I guess they're right. I accept that. But I still can't see somehow 100% that second touch from or the first touch from Alvarez. Mm-hmm. It's hard. I see there are some.
You have to look pretty properly to find it out.
And fair, I guess VAR did. I accept that, but it just shows you that culture of being in the Champions League. It's something about. I was saying just before the penalty shootout for Atletico Madrid, it's so important not only to go to the next round, but to win over the culture of Real Madrid. Real Madrid, can you imagine, Marcus, playing for a team where you feel that you have to win, that you should win, that is a duty to win the Champions League? We will win the Champions League. We don't care. We can have a big problem in the La Liga, but we will always win the Champions League. What a feeling that must be for the player.
And there's an an inevitability about it, and that is what is so.
Rudiger, of all people, the Rudiger's worst penalty in the history of Champions League. And Oblak, I think that was not his best day at work. And he would be very disappointed letting that penalty in.
A little fun fact for you. Atletico Madrid since 2014 have gone out to Real Madrid in the last 16, in the quarterfinals, in the semifinals, and 2 finals. So not only their rival, but their kryptonite, if you may, in the Champions League. I think it's also a great example of what the Champions League, regardless of its format, you have I don't like using the word, but an aura in the Champions League. And Real Madrid have that. Bayern have that to an extent because they go deep. They tend to go deep. And I think that's maybe we were negligent of in the analysis when you go up against the Leverkusen. It's not just Leverkusen against Bayern. It's Leverkusen against Bayern in the Champions League. And I think I told that example last week with Arsenal playing Bayern. It will be the same when Arsenal play Real Madrid. They have to build a culture to compete under the Champions League lights. And that's why I think Real Madrid would be a tougher test than Atletico Madrid, for instance, even though they have their separate strengths and weaknesses. And that's what you see with Bayern there as well. And if we go into the German teams and if we start with Bayern, despite Kompany being Kompany and he's fresh and a new team in a way in terms of him as part of this rebuild, there was something vintage Bayern about that performance in the Champions League, I'd say.
Absolutely. And I must say as well, yes, Leverkusen after 3-0 at Allianz, with a red card, with a big mistake from the goalkeeper, with a penalty, you could say that they were hard done by, but still Bayern deserved to win that game. Then coming back to Leverkusen, you needed 2 things. You need Florian Wirtz and a miracle. And Florian Wirtz was then out with an injury. He didn't play. Hopefully he'll be back in 3-4 weeks. He'll be back because the last thing for now Leverkusen is to win the German FA Cup. So the German Cup.
And by all means would be a success for them if we're thinking if you become runners-up last 16 or am I trying to spin it?
I think we tried to spin it a bit. I was thinking when I saw, that was my point, when I saw Bayern, how they play against Leverkusen. Because Leverkusen could have used that game, get an early lead. There is still a chance, and there will be maybe 2-1 for Leverkusen at the end. But I think that we slowly have to now discuss that the reigning champion is so far away from Bayern this season. Fair enough. Leverkusen, as you were talking about, the culture of being in the Champions League is the same. They have the culture to always expect to win the domestic league as Bayern have done over generations. But you're out of the Champions League. You're so many points behind Bayern now. You have to ask yourself, and I guess that is the culture that they will try to implement at Leverkusen, that you now have to discuss what did go wrong this season. And we've talked about all season that is after winning a season to get runner-up, maybe win a cup is good. And I agree with you. But people will say that, I would agree with them. But you have to ask yourself what did wrong, because this was the best team in the Bundesliga last season. Mm-hmm. And I think there was something about how Kompany and Bayern went on with this game in Leverkusen that looks very solid. There were a couple of hit the post a couple of times. Musiala was dancing around there. And there was something about them that I think Bayern fans will love to see. And for me, these 2 games was a big, big breakthrough for Vincent Kompany as the coach of Bayern. We've said he missed those. He's missed those big games. We know about Bayer Leverkusen in the cup and in the league. We had Feyenoord, we had Barcelona, but now he's there. Having said that, Marcus, I think that we can make a case. It's possible to make a case that the 2 best teams left from the 8 now is Inter and PSG. I mean, they're so impressed. Mm-hmm. And because we have had PSG playing English teams, we kind of know more about them and we know how they play. We see Enrique, we see his youth, we see his speed, we see his counter-attack. But wow, Inter. I mean, first of all, talking about speed, talking about potential match winners, talking about some solid kind of way of defending. So Bayern Inter, that is a big game. And I'm not 100% sure that that Bayern is a much better team than Dortmund, but I'm not sure which of them have the biggest chance to go through, because Barcelona is a bit vulnerable. We have seen Barcelona they're high pressure. There's so much space at the back. It's Barcelona, Dortmund, so they go back to Signal Iduna Park, the second game. Wow, I love Champions League. I think that is a conclusion.
And I'll just conclude on the Bayern matter as well, just on top of what you said. A couple of thoughts. I think it's one, in terms of Kompany's statement win, but it's also in terms of his tactical win. I'd say the second leg is a bigger tactical win for him than the first one. The first one was great. It's 3-0. A couple of mistakes. Not taking away from the achievement, because Bayern deserved that win. A 3-0 though was on the heavier side. But the way then to approach that second game, and you saw the way they approached it compared to when they played Leverkusen away in the Bundesliga. A lot more aggressive, a lot more high pressing, and overall deserved to win. And Kane again delivering in these Champions League moments that he's expected. On the note about developing or not, what Leverkusen have to take a note, and it's to do with my first point, is it's fair if they lost, and they lost in a different manner. But in terms of from a developmental perspective, they didn't have a chance against Bayern in these games. No. And then you are 8 points. Let's say it ends up at 10 points difference in the league as well. Then the pendulum has swung pretty significantly from what you were last season to now. And then I think there is a case to be made in terms of, okay, well, where has this team digressed? Or is that Leverkusen's level, and last year was a sort of freakish occurrence? But I think it's an interesting discussion because we haven't really entertained that possibility until now.
No, we haven't. And I think that we'll go deeper into that, maybe get an expert or Leverkusen discussing that with us, because I think Dortmund, Leipzig, and Leverkusen all want to establish themselves as the main challengers to Bayern. Bayer Leverkusen managed to do that last season, and it's interesting to listen to the analysis what went wrong, quote, this season, because this is still a reigning champion that is so far behind. Remember, Bayern were third last season. They were after Stuttgart as well. So they're third. So that speaks volume for Bayern and Kompany. Interesting as well, Neuer being out with injury. Urbig, the new signing, the young goalkeeper. I've been a part of that many times. Well, yeah, I will say many times. After every Bayern game, they have a banquet. Is that in English? Banquet? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they're meeting loyal sponsors, people who've been of the travel contingency, and they meet at the hotel, and the players will sit in the middle, and they have a dinner, they have a buffet. And then Dresden or whoever is in charge will make a speech. The players, the coaches, the management are available for them. It's quite interesting. It's very Bayern. It's very, and I say that in a very good way. I was loving being a part of that, because you always met people, you always had a chance to talk to people. And this time, Dresden, the CEO of Bayern, he single-handed out Urbig to make a round of applause because of his performance in the game. He had some good saves, and he has a good presence for a young kid. And it was so funny because they kind of zoomed into it. I mean, it looks like he was 9 being with it, and he probably pinched himself because you suddenly you're the goalkeeper for a Champions League contender, big Bayern. So great stories in football.
Great stories indeed. And from one story to another, it is Dortmund. And Dortmund are in the quarterfinals. They were finalists last season. Horror start, if you may. 1-0 down through Jonathan David. A big Kobel mistake. I don't know what he's doing. 1-0 down, and you think, okay, here we go. And then Dortmund turned around. And I laugh. I smile when I say this because Dortmund make me laugh. Like I find it, I like the club, but the more we speak of it, the more I just give up in terms of making sense of the matter. 10th in the Bundesliga, performance is poor. Last game is Augsburg at home. They lose 1-0. It's just, when we've had an episode about the infrastructure around it, but then they find themselves in the quarterfinals, and then they play Barcelona, and we're here thinking, well, like you said, get them to Signal Iduna Park in the second leg, and who knows what might happen. Is there a way to analyze it, or do we just sit in for the ride, I guess?
Yeah, and I think there is always when you define a club, you can say typical Dortmund or typical Arsenal, typical Real Madrid. That is to win the penalty shootout. But I think if we go down, I was thinking of that yesterday when I watched them. That was the first game of the evening, and I was thinking the Augsburg win and the Lille win makes sense in terms that is Dortmund's maybe his weakness and strength, because they need that extra thing to take them to the next level. And there are too many players in that team, in that kind of attitude environment, that they kind of rise to occasions like the Champions League. Because if you see back now, I mean, in 10 months, Borussia Dortmund have been is in a quarterfinal of a Champions League and in the final of a Champions League. It was more or less the same story last season, although they weren't 10th, which is worse now. But it was an interesting game. Maybe a soft penalty on Guirassy. I think that was enough to give it. So Can come up, been a lot of criticism around his position, being a leader or not. And then you have Maximilian Bayer that come from Hoffenheim, 22 years of age, ending up being a match winner in a tricky game. Because I'm saying tricky game in terms of Lille is a good team, but is not seen as a great team. But what we know about French football, we've seen PSG. I mean, you know that physical way. They are good organized. There is a lot of speed. I mean, what could you? Thank God, Marcus, we have retired, because now you need speed in every department. And as you're saying, he's Canadian, isn't it, Jonathan David? And making a 1-0 thing, that's over with. And then because Dortmund have a kind of attitude problem, you think that will make them, okay, 2-3-0, and then they turn around and win it, Niko Kovac. So I think that is also important for Niko Kovac's project, because he will always, when they analyze this season, being that they'll be 6th or 7th or 8th, 9th or 10th, but he can still say, well, we showed in the Champions League that this project is something to put your money on and will make him get a pre-season and a new season.
And like you say, it is the strength and the weakness. Remember, before going into this game, yes, Lille are 5th in Liga, but they beat the Portuguese champions to get here, convincingly so. The problem with Dortmund here is, and that will be to Kovac's frustration, is we can see, because they played a good game. They were aggressive, They created a fair amount of chances. Were lucky not to score in the first half. Bayer suddenly, who's had a mediocre season at best for Dortmund, with a fantastic finish. The problem is, and you know this stat better than any, and when it comes to mentality, there's a consistency, right? Consistency, mentality, and then performances. So that's what some people say, okay, but winning the league, winning the Premier League, the Bundesliga, it's throughout an entire season. A cup lives its own life. You can turn up in the right games. You can make a run of it. That's what Dortmund can do. And so maybe the clearest way we can make sense of these performances, or these roller coaster performances, is that Dortmund are a good team, but they're not a good enough team to sustain that over the course of a season. And so when they find themselves in the Champions League, when you find yourself against Barcelona, of course you can find yourself motivated and get the best studies. These are good players. Dortmund have one of the best squads in the Bundesliga. It's just that is why we're dumbfounded by the fact that they can't sustain it. But against Lille, and I think if they don't mess up too much in Barcelona, because that's a tough game, then I think it's wide open when you come back to Dortmund. You know how it is on a Champions League night in Dortmund as well, where that can live its own life again.
And I think that the great thing about playing Barcelona is that Barcelona will be favorites. They are a contender, will win the Liga. It seems that nobody wants to win the La Liga this season, but they're there. Hansi Flick, that is a German connection. He's coming back, playing against the German football. But I think there is two things just to conclude here, Marcus, if you see the 8 teams now, you have Manchester City and Liverpool out, and the Farmers kind of league, they call German football. They got 2. They got Dortmund and Bayern. That is a fact. It's also a fact that PSG seems like the real deal after all the stars leaving them. Luis Enrique has put together a team with young, speedy people in there. I mean, amazing the counter-attacks you have there. So maybe sometimes we should be a bit conscious or not talk so much about Farmers League, because we see that these teams are brilliant. And if I may, Marcus, just for those who are not up to date with the draw, so I just take that is Bayern Inter. Marcus, who will be go through, Bayern or Inter?
Are you giving me this?
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say Bayern, of course.
Bayern Inter. I think that is a very, very 50, and I still got my German glasses on.
I know, but we have a responsibility, Dad.
Yeah, but I want Bayern to go through. But Bayern Inter, there is a history there. Remember when Mourinho won the final, when a colleague of mine at Sky asked him, well, you didn't have the ball, and Mourinho just turned around and said, well, we take the trophy, then you take your ball back, the ball back to Munich. Barcelona, Dortmund.
I think we have to say Barcelona. I think we want to give Dortmund a chance, but I think we have to say Barcelona.
I just hope that Dortmund can go back to Signal Iduna Park to have a chance.
Yes,
because I saw that game. Yamal, fantastic. Although I'm not sure that he meant the first one. I think that was a shot. But being a wonder kid that he is, you never know. So Bayern Inter, Barcelona, Dortmund, the winner of this game will play the semi-final. Right. So that could be a all German thing, and then we'll be 100% sure to get a German team in the final. That's another thing. So your Arsenal, you watched them yesterday against PSV. Arsenal against Real Madrid.
Am I guessing with my heart or my head? That's the question. If I owe my heart a chance, I'll say Arsenal. But I think Real Madrid again. I think they have something inevitable about them in the Champions League. They find a way to win, and it's increasingly fascinating to me how they do it.
And I think this is going to be a hell of a game, because you made a good point. Arsenal need to take their next step in the Champions League. We saw that against Bayern when they play, as you were saying. But Arsenal Real Madrid is fantastic, because Arteta, the players, they need to rise to the occasion. And Real Madrid have shown themselves that they can be vulnerable also this season. Yep. But wow, Mbappe, Enrique, the Enrique goal, if you haven't seen the goal he scored this weekend in La Liga, it's a fantastic goal that he scored. So that is Arsenal against Real Madrid. And last but not least, PSG against Aston Villa.
And that's fantastic. And these are the stories. And these are what we want to have in an increasingly format in which the bigger teams are protected in a way. And Villa is a big team, don't get me wrong, but over the later years, decades, they don't have that historical precedence. And how fantastic it is to get Villa in these games. And these are what will constitute a core part of their history. And they're in the quarterfinals, nothing less than they deserve. But PSG, the big irony with them having the biggest stars in the world playing for them, and in the first year, proper year, in which they don't. They are a proper team. And I like Enrique. I really like Luis Enrique. And there's a sad personal part to his story with him losing his daughter and whatnot. But even through those clips I came across on social media as well, I think it's so telling what kind of man he is. So there's a lot of nice narratives, I guess, to hook onto in the remaining games.
I agree with you. And I think this is going to be one of the tactical tightest game, because Luis Enrique and Emery, they know each other, of course. I will just say now, when PSG play Aston Villa, there will be a chant in the stand. You'll never say that. You never say that. Champions of Europe. You can never say that. Because funny enough, PSG, with all their oil and gas money, they have never won the European Cup, but Aston Villa have. So these are also funny stories when you go into the end of the Champions League. But wow, whatever math you're doing, whatever tip you're doing about those quarterfinals, there will be so many stories in the semifinals. There'll be so many stories for the final. And I'm just wondering, Marcus, that you, if I'm not wrong, the Champions League final will be the weekend that you getting married. So I'm just worried.
Is it actually?
Yeah, it is. I think that is the Saturday, but you'll be marrying on a Friday. So
okay.
I think the pool party there need to be screened somewhere.
I'm adding that to the list now. Thank you. That's actually a good call.
Talk to the wedding planner.
I'm going off this call straight in.